Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. As always, I'm so happy that you're joining us this week. And every week when you listen to the show, I really do hope that my guests and I provide a tip, an idea, strategy, something that you can put into place, put into place today after listening to the show to help you navigate whatever change you're going through in your life. And to help you on that journey, I have my free gift for you, which is my communication style assessment. If you have not taken that yet, please go to whitmanassociates.com/CSA and get your report sharing what your superpowers are and your blind spots, which is probably kind of more important. So again, go to whitmanassociates.com/CSA. My gift to you to help you navigate change in your life. Now, my motivational quote today is by Marc Maron. And Marc says, the medium of podcasting and the personal nature of it, the relationship you build with your listeners and the relationship they have with you, they could be just sitting there chuckling and listening. There's nothing like that. Now, I've been podcasting for 9 years. Yes, I'm a dinosaur. I started before anybody even knew what a podcast was. And hosting my two shows really has brought me so much joy because I get to meet these amazing thought leaders and innovators from around the world. And the other thing I'm super grateful for with hosting my shows is that people that purchase from me or that hire me on the other side, right, with my business, they have that like, no trust factor because they've been listening to me for a month, a year, 2 years, whatever it might be. So that like, no trust factor, because I'm in their ears, it becomes super personal and intimate. And I don't mean intimate in a weird way, but that like, no trust factor is built before they even meet me or come to one of my workshops. Wow, blow my mind. I love it. So today, my guest, of course, is an expert on this topic. Now, Tony, say your last name for me.
Tony Guarnaccia, Tony G.
Tony G. I know, I always call you Tony G. So today my guest is Tony G, and he's helped thousands of businesses survive crisis, whether it was post 9/11, during the Great Recession, or amidst massive acquisitions. Tony's helped businesses navigate the uncertainties and emerge stronger on the other side. And as a child, Tony experienced firsthand the devastating crisis of business failure when his parents' small business failed and they lost everything, including their home. Its impact on his life was powerful. Having lost everything, he determined he would one day figure out how to help business owner, like his parents, by learning how to run a profitable business. Now, this business has shaped his entire 20 plus career. Now, as an entrepreneur, business owner, and enterprise marketer, Tony worked with literally the best businesses in every industry. Now, Tony has returned to his entrepreneurial roots to bring the strategy, tactics, and resources normally reserved for large enterprises to small businesses. Now, today, his focus is on bringing the same vision to podcast hosts and guests to make podcasting profitable. He believes that by growing small businesses together, we can impact not just our local communities, but also the world. And amen, brother, I believe that. So, Tony, always good to hang out with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, I always love our conversations, and your brilliancy freaks me out every time we talk. You're always creating or reinventing or reiterating to make it better and easier for businesses to find avenues to monetize, right? To create revenue and grow. Yeah. So they don't go bankrupt like your experience with your parents' business.
Correct.
Let's talk about, so podcasting, there's two sides of the mic, right? So let's talk the side where, how do we craft our pitch that will catch the podcast host's interest in interviewing us on their show, right? So we want to be the guest on the show. How do we create that really dynamic interest by the host?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so to me, it starts with adding value. So you always, no matter, I would start with your mindset. So where is your mindset? Are you looking at what you're trying to get out of it, or what can you contribute? And really, how can you bring some sort of transformation to the host audience? Because that's really what we're here for. At the end of the day, no matter what you're selling, what you're providing, what you're doing, you want to have some sort of, what the words I've always put in my own kind of business acumen has been to have positive change. So what kind of positive change are you depositing into others' lives? And as an extension of that, specific to a podcast, what kind of change are you bringing to the audience? And really to think about it, one of the constructs I built years ago is called the results bridge. So really, if you think about it like a bridge, you're crossing over, a river, where are they today? Where do they want to be? How you take them from where they are today to where they want to be. And specific to a podcast, you obviously can't take someone from where they are all the way to where they want to be. That's where maybe it's a coaching or a product might serve the problem. But what next step can you contribute during that short period of time you're with that host and their audience to take the next step? And so that is kind of really your objective. And the question becomes, okay, how do I communicate that in a pitch that would be appealing to the host to actually get booked on the show and have that opportunity? But it starts with the mindset and say, okay, what kind of value can I provide to that host? And then succinctly, very important, very important, if I can say the word, succinctly communicating that in your pitch, because people are busy. They don't want to read a ton of information. So it's got to be very short and to the point of the value you're going to provide and why you would be qualified to actually communicate that.
Yeah, because the host, like myself and like you, right? You're a podcast host too. We want to have guests on that are dynamic, that can bring their topic to life and have the listener say, oh, I could do that. What a great tip. What a great idea. And if we can engage the listener like that, now you have a new fan, but it also grows the podcast host base, listener base too, so that we could continue to grow and serve bigger. And I know you're all about that, Tony, right? It's about providing quality content, information, strategies, whatever it might be that you help with your clients. But when you're on a podcast or you're hosting your podcast, we really want to help people do that transformational, again, that bridge, moving from point A to point B. And the podcast is just becoming such a beautiful way to do that. You know what's interesting? My listenership, the age of my listenership, and this fascinates me, as I get older, the listenership gets younger, Tony. And I think because the younger generation, the millennials and younger, right, as they're moving through their career, they're listening to podcasts, whether they're jogging, whether they're taking their dog for the walk, whether they're commuting in the morning, but they're really choosing what they want to listen to. Yeah. And that's why podcasts, I think, have become super, everybody's listening to certain podcasts, right? Yeah. So we want to build that, and we want to be invited to participate. And it's a great way to show what your expertise is. Now, how to be a stellar podcast guest during and after their interview so that they earn that reputation that we're talking about as someone that is worth interviewing. Because, like, let's say you and I, right, you didn't know anybody, you're new to being a guest. And at the end, I go, wow, Tony, that was a great show. You would say, Con, do you know any podcasters that maybe I could be on their podcast? I will easily, do that introduction. So what are some of the things that the guest should be doing during that interview to do the wow factor?
Yeah, well, it starts, anything I always think about is before, during, and after. And so it starts really before. And so before, it could be anything to making sure you really put the time in to provide all the information necessary for the podcast in the first place. So many times podcasters, they want to promote the episode. So they ask for a headshot. They ask for you to fill out the questions you're going to, suggest to be asked, the topics. So making sure you have everything handed over on a silver platter for the host makes their life easier, and also shows that you're competent, because unfortunately, a lot of times you do a show and people don't get you the headshot and you have to scramble and get it. They don't get you the form filled out. So that's before you even go on the podcast. And of course, before the actual interview, how are you communicating before? Is your mic set up in advance? Do you have all the tech or are you scrambling? Are you dressed appropriately? All these things matter. Like for me, I have a professional backdrop behind me. So every kind of detail is put into place. And then of course, during the interview, you want to know how to speak, you want to communicate properly, just all those pieces come into play. And then the real magic is many times afterwards. So before and after is really where the magic happens. That's like what you mentioned, maybe ask for a referral, maybe give them a referral. How can you help them? A lot of times the relationship is built afterwards. And then kind of without saying, after you're off the interview, what are you doing post interview? So giving a review, promoting the show. A lot of times, unfortunately, the host puts a time, I don't think people realize this, but you're putting a ton of time, money and effort into the show. You're producing, you're editing it, or you're hiring someone to do that. Yes. And you're excited, you're promoting it, and then the guest does nothing. And so not cool. So what can you do to support? And really at the end of the day, again, what kind of value you're providing to that host, because you are the guest. And so you want to try to support them. And it's difficult. That's one of the reasons I know we're going to talk about software, but to really solve that problem, because people, I think, want to do it, but it's difficult because they just, they don't know how, the technology, the time, there's a lot of pieces to it.
Absolutely. And I really hope everybody heard that, because I know everybody is looking to get on podcasts, even maybe more than starting a podcast. And I get that, right? Because it's a great way, based on my introduction, it's a great way to get the outreach and to grow that like, no trust factor, because they're listening to you. And in my case, I even have the YouTube channel. So if they choose to watch, right, they could see Tony's body language, how he's connecting with me, right? If he's nodding as I'm speaking, right? We're engaged with each other. That's really important. And it's so funny you said that, because I had someone, I was supposed to record a show the same day as we're recording our show, Tony. And I sent her 3 reminders. You didn't fill out the application. You didn't accept the invite. And so yesterday I said to her, I'm out of time. I have to write I have to write my show notes, right? I have to write my introduction. That takes time and effort to do that.
Right.
Find my quote. It takes time to do that. And so I sent her, I canceled the invitation. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to have her on, because I don't have the time to chase someone who wants to be on my podcast. Like, what are we doing here? I'm busy, right? I'm promoting you. And the other thing I want everybody to hear really clearly that Tony said, when I am on someone else's podcast, I promote the crap out of it, because they are honoring me by having me as a guest. I make sure that I introduce them and their show to my email list, all of my social media, probably close to 9,000 people, right? Yeah. That's my responsibility if I want to be a guest on a show. So even if you don't have a big following, you could still show support for that podcast host. And that support will be so appreciated down the road for those that don't. Because by the way, Tony, do you track? I'm starting to track who's writing the reviews, because that's one of the, requests. Can you listen to a couple of shows? I'd love your review. I'd love your honest feedback. That makes me a better host, right?
Yes.
So we have to track these things. So if you want to be a guest, you want to have a stellar reputation out there. So more hosts, more people will ask you to be on their podcast. Did I miss anything? I just wanted to kind of spotlight some of the things.
Well, you brought up a good one, like another one I didn't mention. And I have a lot of this in a course that I cover, but one of the other things is kind of a no-brainer, but listen to other past episodes before you go on the show.
Yes.
Like, I can't tell you how many times people just go on and they're like, they don't even know what you're like, because every host is a little different. Some are more conversational, some follow a script, some have questions they ask every participant, and you want to be caught off guard. So, spend a few minutes. What I do, because I'm always short on time, I listen to things at 2 times speed, so I get through it very quickly. And, you can, average show is maybe a half hour. So you're talking at 15 minutes. So 45 minutes. And the nice thing about podcasting is you can do it while you're doing anything else. You could be working out. You could be multitasking. You could do your, clean up your email, listen to the podcast. So just make the most of your time, but at least listen to a few episodes in advance.
It's funny because that's one of the things I send the link to my show, because isn't that funny? We're Italian, everybody. Tony and Connie are Italian. I want, when someone is a guest on my show, I want to create good content for my listeners. Yes, of course. But I always want my guests to feel comfortable and welcome. And I want us to have this wonderful dynamic conversation so that they're engaged. I'm engaged, right? They're listening like you just did. You brought up a good point, Connie. That's the listening component. And that's what makes for a great guest. But you have to listen to the show before you go on. Whenever I'm a guest on a show, I do listen to 2 or 3 episodes. I try to listen to like a man, a woman, different topics maybe that I don't know something about, to see just how the host asks the follow-up questions and that kind of thing. And I agree with what you said. Some hosts do ask the same questions. That's not the way my show is set up, right. But some people do ask those same questions. There's nothing wrong with that. No. But then you get on and you think, oh, I didn't think about that. That's horrifying to do the because that's the worst thing for a host, to have ums all over the place and they have to edit out. You've just made more work for them. Right.
Right. And even as a guest, you're not looking as competent because you can only edit out so much. So if you're stumped and you ask the same question every time, you don't have the answer off the top of your head. You're just not looking as sharp as you possibly could. And again, why are you doing it in this first place? A lot of people want to be a guest on podcasts. They want to build their authority. They want to build their income. They want to build their credibility, their influence, all these things. You're just negating all of that. Actually, you're doing more harm than good to yourself when you're not looking polished.
And it's funny, I've had two people in, my 9 years doing this, maybe more, but two people that are popping into my head. And I met with them like you and I, Tony. Actually, somebody referred Tony to the podcast. You were my podcast. That's how we met a few years ago. Yeah. And now we're in a couple of network. We can't get rid of each other, right? We can't, Hey, Tony, it's good to see you. What's going on? Right. We keep popping into each other. But two people came on and it was crazy meeting them. Like you and I met, they were conversational. They had great personality. They were funny. And then when we got on the show, they read their notes. I wanted to die. And I thought, please don't read your notes. And then I would ask the next question. And they were so timid and nervous to be on the show that they read their notes. Yeah. So my recommendation with that is don't have it scripted out. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot and rely on reading. And it's going to sound like you're reading. Have bullet points so that I don't think that's a bad thing, so that you don't miss anything, the key things you want to say and share with the listeners. So have maybe bullet points, and then that helps you keep it conversational as well. Yeah. Have you had that on yours where people have read their script?
Yeah. I mean, some people, thankfully, I've been fortunate enough I focus more on people that are kind of more adept at this. I've done it for a while. And so I haven't had to deal with that too much, thankfully. But the other thing that comes to mind as you're saying that is obviously know your material, but a good way to think about everything is how can you apply it as a story? So stories are incredibly powerful. And so I don't know how much time working on my own individual story and multiple stories to support every fact. And so if you put things through like a story framework, like one I really like is Donald Miller. He's got the story brand framework, which is very just kind of, I can actually see it in my head as I'm going through my own story. Then I don't have to rely on notes or bullet points or anything else because I'm a visual person. It's in my head and I just tell. And after all, it is my story. I should know my own story. So if you think about everything like that, you should not have to rely on anything once you get some practice. Now, obviously, out of the gate, you might want to have some notes, but try to not really rely on that because you just lose all the rapport and engagement that you can build.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people, they don't ask me for questions, which is fine. Again, right? I listen to the show. I kind of know where they're going. And then the day of, they're like, okay, so is there anything like that you don't want me to talk about? And I always say to them, I'm an open book. If you have a question based on my expertise that you think your listeners will benefit from, of course I'll answer. And without getting too personal, right? But I really am an open book, Tony, like you. I do share my background. I share my failures, right? Everybody sees where you are now and they think you're an overnight success. No, that's not how it works, right? We've had failures through our careers as well, and sometimes sharing those stories makes you even more human, right? That you're not this perfect icon that somebody should listen to because you have all the answers, right? It's about failing forward and learning from each other. And again, as the tide rise, we can help all these ships rise together. So my intro, I love that. Not only do you want to help the individual and the business, but you want to do it bigger, right? We want to make movements in the world just to make everybody thriving, not just surviving in life. And I think philosophically, you and I are very similar with that, right? Let's do this together and grow together. It's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I look at it is people are podcasting or want to be a guest on a podcast for really three reasons. They want to improve their audience, they want to improve their income, and then want to improve their impact. And you can do all three. You can do one of all. I mean, some people are nonprofits and they have a passion about their message. Other people are doing it for business, but really everyone can fit in one of those three buckets. And that's really why I'm doing this, is to really help make podcasting profitable for everybody. And profit can be defined in those different ways. It's not just necessarily about money. It's about the impact you're making too.
Yeah. And it's funny. Everybody goes, well, have you monetized your podcast? And I laugh and I say, okay, well, people aren't buying something directly, right? Because my gift is a free giveaway. I'm not making money off of that. But then when people follow me and they start following the show, and this has been happening all this year, I'll do my 90-minute workshop tone. And then at the end, people buy, right? I have an offer and they buy, and I go, oh, I haven't met you. Like, how'd you find me? Because I don't know them. And they say, oh, I saw you speak at a summit. I started following you on the podcast. Every week, it's like, is she talking to me?
Yeah.
I saw you did the workshop. I was like, oh, I have to go learn more from Connie. I like everything she says. And then at the end, they're like, no brainer. I have to work with you. So you build that, exactly what you said, that like, no trust factor through the listening, but now it's monetizing for me because people trust me before they even meet me, before I even show them what my offer is. That's impactful. That's important because again, people say to me, it's like you're talking directly to me in my ears when I listen to the podcast. That's the intimacy part I alluded to at the onset of the show, right, Tone? We're in your ear.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very powerful. And most people, they do just try to think, hey, can I make money directly off the podcast? But it's not about that. It's like you said, it's building that know, like, trust. It's also building a relationship with the host or the guest, depending on which side. That's sometimes the best source. So are you interviewing your ideal clients? Are you going on shows where your ideal client is the host? Or another way to think about it is if they're not your ideal client, could they be a partner? Could they be affiliate partner, joint venture partners? There's so many ways to monetize a podcast beyond just monetizing the audience. And so you have to kind of broaden your understanding of how this works. And that's really where you can have a positive impact in your own business.
Yes. And monetization can mean very different things. It's not about getting sponsors to, getting Coca-Cola or Pepsi to sponsor your shows. We're talking about, you could do that. I mean, if you get ginormous, you certainly can attract sponsors like that, but there's more of a subtle connection. Really, really, Tony, and you and I are really, this is, I think, who we are at the core and is important to us. It's about building relationships. We don't just want a one and done. Like Tony and I, we've known each other like 3 years now, I think.
Yeah. A few years now,
and we reconnect and how's mom? How's this? And then, okay, what are we doing for business? Right. And supporting each other on the back end with giveaways and other things. He's become a great partner. I've become a great partner. We built that relationship and it started with him being on my podcast. So beautiful things come from that. Not necessarily, Tony, I'm going to give you $1 because I'm on your show, right? It's not always that transaction of dollars, but sometimes the intrinsic value could be exponentially profitable down the road, building the like, no trust, authority, all of those things we're talking about. Last question. Sure. How can someone maximize that immediate and long-term impact of the podcast interview on their business? And you've created a one sheet. Can you talk about that? Because I think if we can create this one sheet for the podcast, it will help with that maximizing the impact immediately, as well as what we're talking about, building that long-term trajectory of people following you and subscribing to you. And if you eventually host your own show, they already know you, that they'll start listening to your show, right? So talk about that one sheet, because I think that kind of frames out everything we're talking about. Yes. And you do have a tool for them.
Yes. So one of the things we talked about earlier is, how do you make a succinct pitch? Because people don't want to read a lot and you have to add the value to the audience. That's can be a challenge, because how do you communicate all those things when you don't have the time or the space in the email? This is where a podcast one sheet comes into play, because what it is think about it as almost like a resume for your guest experiences. So, if I'm a HR recruiter, I'm looking to hire somebody, I want to say, okay, who are they? What's their background? Are they qualified? The host is going to have those same kind of questions. They're going to want to know what other shows have you been on, and how were you on that show? Were you just reading a script like you mentioned before, or were you actually kind of conversational? Do you certainly have the background to support what you're going to talk about? The experience. Do you make it easy for the host? Do you have the topics and questions? And so this is where one sheet comes into play. And so that online resume can be accessed via a link. You click on a link, host can read it, say, okay, are they a good fit, or hopefully, not. And so I built a tool to do that, because traditionally you would have a big podcast agency, a marketing agency, they do this, maybe it'd be like $1,000. Usually it's a PDF, which doesn't always go through email. And I thought myself, just for my own self, because as you know, I did 86 podcast interviews last year, and I used it all the time. So I was like, why not just make this simpler? and make it like an online document. And then I thought, well, other people probably use this. So I created this tool and I said, why not just put it out there for free? And so this is actually a free tool. And it's, it's worked wonders for me, and hopefully it'll do that for people that are listening here today.
This is such an important thing, Tony. And when we reconnected and you showed me the tool, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And it's a free gift that you offer. And here's the thing. If you're listening and thinking, oh, I don't know where to begin. Oh, what would my topic be? Stop and breathe first and use the template that Tony's created, and it uploads your bio, it uploads your links, it uploads your headshot, and it's all in one place, so that as a host, I can't be looking at 5 emails from you. If you make it too difficult for me, I can't have you on the show. I'm flying, right? I'm busy. You have to make it as easy as possible for the host that is inviting you or asking you to be on the show. So the one sheet, I think, is such an important tool, Tony. And I think the other thing too, it'll help them narrow their topic. It'll help them be, you said before, that succinct, right? That you have to be real clear about what your objective is and how you want to support the host of the show, but also what content are you going to give the listeners? So I think that one sheet just helps ground everything, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, right?
Yeah. And what's really nice about it is you can actually do multiple one sheets. So I happen to talk about podcasting nowadays. I also, as you know, I've talked about marketing and marketing strategy. So for myself, I actually created 2 separate podcasts, one sheets, different questions, different topics, same pictures, same headshot, but in terms of the bio, tweaked a little bit, but they're separate because they're separate audiences. So for whoever people you serve, important thing is you customize the pitch to the host. And when I say pitch, this is your request to get interviewed. That's what I mean by pitch. And so if you can make it as customized as possible, why wouldn't you? And so instead of doing the old method, the traditional method of maybe doing a PDF and having to use a design agency to do it, what the software does is you can literally change it for every show you want to be on and customize it to them, which makes it much more powerful.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, this is important, guys, because if you're one sheet and you're clear on how you can support the host, because it's got to be what's in it for the host. And I'll just tell you why that is, not to sound pompous or anything, because that certainly isn't my intent. But I get requests to be on my show because it's popular. And Tony, I bet the same thing for you. I probably get 10 people a week saying, hey, I listened to your show. I love it. I think I'd be a great guest. And if they go on and on that they have a PhD and this and that, and it's all about them, I'm like, so what's in it for my listeners? And that I'm very protective of my listeners, right, Tone? Right, so we have to make sure that the pitch that Tony is talking about on the one sheet, that it's clear to the host that, wow, where have you been my whole life? I really need to have you on my show. My listener is going to eat up this content. They're going to eat you up with your background. So you really want to make it how you can serve, not I have a PhD, I have 3 PhDs, and you do want your credentials. I'm not saying don't put them in, but don't lead with that, because I don't know, Tony, I'll get your perspective on this. Credentials don't impress me. Results impress me. So if you've been around and you've created a community where you're making a huge impact in the world, I want you to share your story. I want to support that, right? Because you're a world thought leader as well, versus your own ego. So just be careful. There's a fine line. We need credentials, but I don't know that you necessarily want to overload with credentials. Where do you land with that one, Tone? What do you think?
Yeah. So what I would do is focus probably more on, and unfortunately people neglect this part, the topics and the questions, because that immediately kind of self-identifies whether you'll be a good fit for the show. Yes. And then, so you have to read it kind of the way a host would read it. They're going to say, okay, what's the topic? Like, what do you want to talk about? Maybe I'll get an idea, a flavor of the questions we're going to ask. And then I want to say, okay, can you actually substantiate this? And that's when I'm going to look at your bio. And in our system, we have an overview, which makes the bio very short, and we also have a place to put in a little headline. So it's very, very quick. So again, people glance, think about it. Again, the best analogy I can give you is a resume for getting on a show. And so if you were doing a resume to get a job, same thing. You want to substantiate what you've done and then have the credentials to support it. So same idea, just have that mindset when you're going to create this, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. So just flipping the script, instead of starting with your credentials, how great you are, you want to start with the content you're going to share and why you think it's valuable. You want to catch the host's ear to think, oh, I love that topic. That sounds fascinating.
Correct.
Right. And then you support it after saying, okay, I really do have the credentials now. Like on mine, I've been doing this 39 years. So they're like, oh, she must know her stuff, right? She's for almost 4 decades with sales. There's an element of authority. Same thing with you. Not only did you grow up with a family business, right? You've worked for companies on the marketing end and now have been in business for a number of years. There's a depth of knowledge that shines through the resume or the bio, right? But don't necessarily start with that. So I love your template. I think it organizes well. I think it spotlights well the guest, right? Trying to get on a show. So everybody, here's the deal. We're out of time, but I do want you to go to get the one sheet. It's a free gift from Tony, and I will put the link in the show notes as well. So it's going to be podcastonesheet.com and then some things after it, but I'll put that in the show notes. Additionally, if you're listening and saying, oh, I filled out the one sheet, I don't know, I think maybe I'm not dynamic enough. I don't know. We all have our record player, right? That plays on and on and on, that I'm not good enough and nobody's going to want me. Jump on a call with Tony. He's wonderful to chat with. He's brilliant, and he will really give you some amazing tips. So email him if you have any questions at Tony, Tony, at, and then it's Meet Tony G. Don't try to say his last name. MeetTonyG.com. And, Tony, you welcome those conversations as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have that. I have, I have a course that helps with a lot of these things. Because I remember when I was doing this, like for the first time, I've been around for a while, but I was like, how do I do it? How do I pick the topic? How do I, it was very confusing for me. And even I've done this for 20 years. And so because of that, I created courses. So there's all sorts of resources. I've priced them all very inexpensively too. They start like $7 because I'm not trying, this isn't a moneymaker. This is something I'm trying to do to really help people to avoid the problem. And, I figured if I learn this through the School of Hard Knocks, why not help others? And it's something I create for myself anyway. So why not just share it with the world? So
that's exactly right. It's not like there's any more effort for you to share it. And here's the other thing, Tony. Now once you fill out this one sheet too, or you have a chat with Tony, you never know, 6 months from now, you might go back to Tony and say, I'm looking to do whatever. Do you do that? And Tony's like, oh yes, I coach that all the time. Right. So it's all about building relationships one brick at a time. We want to build those strong foundations. And that's really what Tony is trying to share with you, to get into his orbit and learn from him. And he's just really good at this. And the software, just so you know, like the one sheet, Tony is brilliant on the back end. He freaks me out. He knows so many cool things. Not only is he good at marketing and messaging, right, which he's brilliant at, he also has this techie brain where he's able to create the software like the one sheet for you to fill in the blank, right? And then send it off. Easy peasy. So I love how your brain works, Tony.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're my little brainiac. Tone, thanks for being on. Again, guys, I will put the podcastonesheet.com in the show notes so that you could click and go directly to the document. And also I will put Tony's email, Tony@meettonyg.com, if you have any questions. Tone, thanks for being on. I love spending time with you and just for sharing this resource. This is an important resource for people trying to get into the podcast world.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again for having me. And it's been a real pleasure today.
Yeah. Always fun hanging out with you, kiddo.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together that no matter what change you're going through in your life or what change you're choosing to bring into your life, maybe getting on podcasts and speaking more, right, to get that confidence up and build that authority. My guests and we have you. I hope the tips and strategies and the wonderful tool free tool that Tony has shared helps you navigate whatever that next chapter is for you. Thank you again for tuning in. I truly am honored that you check out the show every week. And I'm honored that you're on this journey with me and that you find the learning through my guests and the ideas that we share with you, impactful and transformational. Tony and I, and really all of my guests, we're really looking to support you and help create that change in your life. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. I am so excited that you join me weekly, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great week, everybody.